So now that you know everything there is to know about ions at this point, I want to introduce ions of transition metals because they are a special case. So I wanted to save those for the end and give you a separate lecture just so to not confuse you. So here's some just overall information, some fun facts about our transition metals. This is the center block of the periodic table. Okay, so the middle of the periodic table, this is the part that we've skipped over previously whenever we've been talking about metals. Some common everyday uses for our transition metals. You have things like copper, iron, nickel, silver, gold, and I think you're used to hearing about ways that those are used, typically. Also, these transition metals are used as pigment in paint. So you can see titanium, vanadium, cobalt, copper, all of these are used for pigments. And the number here is referring to something we're going to talk about here and the reason why transition metals are special. That's because their valence electrons are not standard. They're not always going to be the same for how many they need to give up. So some common properties of our transition metals to give you more information about them. They are hard, dense, shiny, malleable, good conductors, everything you would think of typically when you think of a metal. Malleable is a term that you may not be as familiar with, and this just refers to the fact that you can permanently change the shape of the metal without cracking or breaking it. So that's really important because obviously we use metal a lot and we need to put it into different structures and shapes to be able to use it. Alloys are a special case when you put two or more transition metals together into a combination, and this can give us like super metals with really special properties. So usually these are stronger and also less corrosive. So you can sort of think of them as like metal hybrids. So this would be things like brass and bronze, steel. All of those are combinations of multiple transition metals, and we'll look at those further in class. So the cations of transition metals. Most transition metals can form ions with several different charges, which is what I was talking about with the paint. So for example, iron could have a charge of +3 or it could have a charge of +2. Whenever we're naming these, we use Roman numerals to indicate what the charge will be of the transition ion. So this first one, iron 3+, if you wrote out the name, it would be iron with Roman numeral 3 in parentheses. Same with the iron 2. So that tells you what the charge is supposed to be. So don't worry about how you would figure this out. Just if you were given the name of a transition metal, this would have to be given to you. So again, you can't determine it from the periodic group like you can the other metals and also the non-metals that we've been talking about. What you can do though is figure out the charge based on whatever it is in a compound with. So for example, here in this compound, we know that the charge of iron would have to be 3+ based on the combination of how many oxygen you have to iron. And remember our little disco trick, this would be like disco in reverse. So this would be iron 3 oxide because again, you know what the charge of oxygen is supposed to be, that's not changing. Here's what the compound would look like if it was iron 2. You would have a 1-to-1 ratio because that 2+ cancels out the 2- of the oxygen. So here's the formula as well as the name of the compound. So you have to use those Roman numerals. Alright, and that's it. So I want you to do this practice problem for class so that I can see you watch the lecture. So determine the ion's charges. So the metal here would be silver. Figure out what silver's charge would be based on this compound, and then also name the compound using those rules on the previous slide. So practice problem again means stop, complete this practice problem. You should be able to figure this out based on your knowledge at this point and this lecture. And I will be checking this for points when you come into class.